Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Yo, parish orphans, retrogrades. I'm doing a special deep dive into the place where science meets philosophy and theology. And tonight, joining me for a deep dive on this nexus of science, philosophy, theology, particularly on the age of the earth. It's really a geology show more than philosophy or science or theology. But we're going to do, I guess, all four of those things together, is my friend Andrew Orozco, who's joined this show from time to time to talk about the end of the earth. We're talking about the beginning of the earth now. He's done a class on the end of the earth, the last book of the Bible. We've talked about shows that we're going to appear on together. We've done all kinds of theology stuff, and he's got the credentials to be here. So this is going to be a better show for having him on. Thanks for joining, Andrew Orozco.
Yeah, always a joy to be back. I mean, I miss the days where I was there in studio, but it's always great to be here. We've discussed everything from, I guess, now the beginning and the end and everything in between at this point.
We'll see. That would take a long time, but yeah,
that's the question. Would it take billions of years, or would it take less than?
Like a couple thousand. Well, yeah. So I did a show on Old Earth, as many of you know, with my brother about a week and a half ago. No, closer to 2 weeks ago. It generated a lot of conversation. It generated a lot of surprise all around. It was surprise on my end because I grew up with geologists from a science background. And so what for me is not in a Catholic, a very Catholic geology family, to what for me is not at all surprising is surprising for a lot of people. What's not a set of assumptions that are, I guess, young Earth has really been popularized in the last couple of decades in Roman Catholicism too. And I had always associated this with Protestantism in the 90s, because that's mainly what it was in the 90s. But there's a history of something equivalent to what's now called younger. There's a bit of historical anomaly, but it's not quite accurate to call it young Earth. But except there's something like it that's co-attends the Catholic tradition richly. So I thought you would be a good person to talk to about it, Andrew. And yes, it was nice when we had those hail days of you staying here and doing the show and having a second mic, that wasn't yet working, and pretending it worked, but really talking. But you know, we'll do our best here.
Yeah, it's all the element of surprise. You know, it was so great being there, but looking forward to all the rich stuff we're going to get into today.
Okay, so let me start out with a little bit of a narrative that few people out there have heard before. That what's that called? Those videos that weirdos watch with pleasing sounds.
Like AMBR. What is it?
Weirdos who like slam their head against the wall or like will bite through the nearest person's neck have to be soothed by AMBR, and if not, they'll return to their weird habits. That I feel like this video is that because our 4-year-old now, Penn, she rearranged the Rodecaster and it set us back a little bit. She has a tendency for mischief. And now I'm hearing you typing on your keyboard from like 8 feet away, like it's right in my eardrum, Steffi. But that's That's not your fault. And I'm not one of these AMBR guys that needs that
AMSR.
stuff.
People in chat. Thank
AMSR.
you.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
weirdos.
you,
Thanks, weirdos. You know that.
Me and Carson. Thank you.
We appreciate
AMSR.
We appreciate having a cool audience, but we got to have some weirdos that know it well. So God bless you guys. We love you.
Mean.
AMSR. No, you know, and if you watch those videos, hey, no judgment. You know, it's like a couple steps away from foot fetishism videos, but that's cool. You know, whatever floats your boat. Just having fun on a Wednesday night. And in all seriousness, I want to start out with a bit of a historical narrative that is part of public intellectual history that is dare I say, completely overlooked now. And I think starts us out on the right foot. So what I'll say, sort of the preface to the preface, is that my view today is strongly old Earth, which I said in a show 12 days ago, strongly, because of the mountains. You know, the best estimates are 100 to 200 sort of independently corroborated proofs that have nothing to do even with the kind of normie, what normie, I think young Earth people think is absolute dating. Well, relative dating methods, corroboration from 20 fields of hard science. But I don't see a whit of evidence for Darwinism, meaning proving the origin of species, which is to say you have to, you know, show that inanimate matter can replicate itself and code information and carry coded information. There's zero information there, and it's embarrassing. So I'm not an evolutionist guy. What I want to talk about is the false coupling of old Earth with macroevolution a little bit. So let me start there. That's the preface to the preface. Andrew will bring you in a second, but I just want to say that there was a movement in the 19-teens in the scientific community in America and Great Britain that was proceeding apace with Einsteinian relativity science. Einstein talked a big game. He promised that what was about to be proven was an eternal universe. And Einstein, who was basically a Spinozan atheist, Jewish Spinozian atheist, who said, I don't believe in a personal God, was really excited about it. In, I think, 1917, he would make these statements like, I'm about to prove the stuff from Democritus in ancient Greece, that the universe doesn't have a beginning. This is going to be a big blow to the religious set. And as the 1920s got underway, something really, really remarkable happened. They were going further and further into a couple of Einstein's theorems, and some of his students found errors, Einsteinian fudge factor. And this ended up leading in 1927 to a complete reversal of all of the trash talk that Einstein and others who would come to be associated with something called the steady state view of the universe, right? A universe without a beginning, would have to eat their words. And Big Bang happened, the Big Bang Theory, which was originally pejoratively named by one of the Big Bang opponents. And this caused a revolution in science. So it caused a revolution in science over the next 3 to 4 decades, where the atheists, materialists like Einstein, and I'll read you quotes from a number of these guys, who had been celebrating in the 19-teens and early 1920s the fact that they were about to show that this mythic bourgeois fairy tale, the Soviet Russians called it a fairy tale of a creation ex nihilo. Specifically, they were referring to St. Augustine's model of the universe, a creation out of nothing, which creates a God, which would obliterate all science, Enlightenment science. They were admitting. I'll read you a handful of quotes after this, and would prove forever, basically, the Christian myth, as the Soviets called it. They thought they trash talked because they thought they were in a position to trash talk. And then it got judo flipped on them, because in 1927, you have the first big finding that verified that this Catholic priest, Father George Lemaitre, had, using the fudge factor in Einstein, showed him a model, a cosmological model that was hard to deny. They didn't immediately extrapolate the age of the universe from it. The modern estimates on old universe, old cosmos, are 13.8 billion years for the universe, about 4.5 billion years for Earth, and about 1 billion years for life. That's current, and those things can fluctuate. But it did obliterate the fervor in the scientific community for materialist, reductionist, determinist atheism. And so what proceeded after that was that after the cosmologists were no longer confident, as they'd increasingly been, about the eternal universe, it tried to be proven by Einstein from 1917 to about 1925. Suddenly, they don't know what to do with all of the mountains of proof that start stacking up in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And the big moment was in 1965, which is when they stopped fighting it. By they, I mean secular science in America and Great Britain. They stopped fighting against the Big Bang, because what happened in 1965 was the culmination, showing this, isometric radiation in the universe, the so-called cosmic microwave background radiation. And they dropped all their defenses, and they tried to re-judo throw what this Catholic scientist had done to them. And we'll get to that in a second. But I just want to take time to show how many friends of Big Bang Theory and how many foes of Big Bang Theory all remarked that before it had even been proven, and in the early decades of Big Bang Theory, this is not a proof, because science doesn't prove anything. Science never proves anything. It just strongly evidences stuff. Proof requires logic. Proof requires syllogism. So science can't prove anything, but it strongly evidences, if it could be shown that the universe had a beginning in time, the Christian model of the universe, specifically, not just Judeo-Christian. I know we don't like that term now anyway, because it's funky, but it's really the creation out of nothing that is so distinctly told of in Genesis 1 and 2. And you have Stephen Hawking saying it. Wow, this sounds like St. Augustine's account of the universe. Yes, Stephen Hawking has read it, and he's a committed atheist. A Jewish scientist after Jewish scientist continues saying it. I'll tell you this, in 1959, which was before the 1965 discovery of the cosmic microwave background radiation that really ended the discussion. And so they used this, they attempted, the secular scientists, the materialists, to use a second judo throw against the Christian scientists. 6 years before that, a survey showed that 2/3 of American astronomers had clung for the previous, whatever that would be, 32 years, to their atheist view that the cosmos was eternal. 32 years after Father Lemaitre really was producing the receipts to show them this is right. The Christian view of the world, a creation requires a creator, a beginning in time requires a creator. Lemaitre was staid about the implications, but this is why everyone was afraid of it. And in the late 1960s, after 1965, they would completely reverse. After the cosmic microwave background discovery had occurred, atheists began to say, if you can't beat them, join them. And they began to they started to do two things, the atheists, after 65, sorry. They started to commandeer Big Bang propaganda, and they started to put out propaganda about the Big Bang, that this was a victory for secular science, which was a brand new tack. And they, in a lot of bad history books and even science books, they just wiped clean the fact that they had been petrified by a victory, by an ostensible or potential victory of Big Bang. I'm going to read you a lengthy list of steady state atheist scientists in the Soviet Union, China, America, what's it called? Nature magazine, Great Britain, that were just petrified of this. Einstein himself. And so that two-part second judo throw by secular science seems to have been effective. So they commandeered this tool of this Catholic priest. And number two, they started coupling it with macroevolution. So anytime you'll notice, if you start talking about the age of the earth or the age of the cosmos, which are both inanimate objects, people always assume you're talking about macroevolution. The age, not just the age of life, but the way that life changes ostensibly or supposedly. And that's just not true. So there is a wide field of old earth scientists, geologists. There aren't many. There aren't really any at all to speak of. I was trying to find any that are like geologists that are deeply studied, aside from like 3 or 4 guys that have kind of made it a cottage industry. There aren't really any geologists who study sedimentology and use, dozens of relative dating techniques that are all very reliable, that all very reliably point toward a certain age range of the earth, between 2 and 4.5 billion years old. But there are a bunch of old earth geologists that are like, evolution, this is nonsense. They haven't even begun the argument. The pro-evolution people, they haven't even begun to say how without a creator on a materialist basis, life could begin to form. How does a rock or even amino acid or whatever start replicating itself? Even blue-green algae, how does it get to replication and information coding phase, which is what cells do, from not? Show me that first cell. It's a joke. It's a bit of a joke, and they kind of won't admit it. So what I want to show you in this thread is some quotes. Albert Einstein, Jewish Albert Einstein, said, "Big Bang suggests too much the biblical idea of creation." He means creation ex nihilo. One of his research partners from his 1919 relativity project, relativity project, Arthur Eddington, said, "The notion of a beginning is repugnant to me." Thomas Gold, another Jewish astrophysicist, says, "It is absurd to think that, as Big Bang teaches, we live in a unique epoch when the universe is changing its character." Herman Bondi, another Jewish, this is the formulator of steady state theory, the lame, eventually defeated competing theory during the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, before they laid down their arm, theory to Big Bang. This Herman Bondi, Jewish cosmologist, mockingly referred to the Big Bang as pre-scientific, as primitive concept, and he likened it to an outdated Christian creation myth, creation ex nihilo. Okay, Big Bang by this Catholic priest is like a Christian creation myth. Now, the strongest, sharpest critic of it was Fred Hoyle, who was a fellow steady state theorist, along with Herman Bondi, who coined the term Big Bang as a pejorative term to mock it. And it caught, kind of like capitalism was coined by Marxists, and who dismissed out of hand the idea of it because he strongly disliked the theological implications of a cosmic beginning. And he was committed to atheism, materialism, steady state. He was arguably the most aggressive agitator against Big Bang there was. There's another guy, Walther Nernst, a Prussian physical chemist, who, after hearing a lecture by Carl von Weizsäcker in 1938 regarding a universe that began to exist, Nernst himself became deeply upset, which is a weird concept. These secular scientist guys in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s were very, very aggressively secular, and they would get upset if they started hearing science proving, in an equivocal sense, that the universe had a creation, which requires a creator, a beginning in time. Nernst argued that the infinite duration of time was a basic element of all scientific thought, and to deny this would mean to betray the very foundations of science. Now, he means post-Enlightenment science. After the Enlightenment killed the father of science, Aristotle, they were doing the Novum Organum. Now, across the pond, in Soviet Russia, Soviet Marxists mounted some of the strongest ideological critiques of the Big Bang cosmology during the 20th century, arguably the strongest, because they would kill niggas for using Big Bang theory, cosmologists over there. The bourgeois and the Christian theory, as they called it, conflicted sharply with dialectical materialism, which posits atheism and an eternal universe. Politburo propagandists and conformist cosmologists argued that a universe with a definite beginning was idealistic, one of their no-no words. That's a 4-letter word from the Politburo. It was fideistic, meaning faith-building, in their broad use of the term, and resembled Christian creation ex nihilo theology far too closely, undermining the Marxist conviction that matter is eternal and self-existing. Stalin's chief of culture and scientific orthodoxy, Andrei Zhdanov, labeled the Big Bang theory's pioneer, George Lemaitre, a Catholic priest, a reactionary falsifier of science. Right? They're completely frantic, in a word, about the preponderance of Big Bang. He accused Western cosmologists of helping the church by, quote, reviving the fairy tale of the origin of the world from nothing. It's like demonic. They're afraid of the world having a creation because that proves there's a creator. The Big Bang suggested an origin point that widely opened the door to religious interpretations of reality. There's a astrophysicist named Robert Jastrow. Listen to this guy. This guy's based. Here's what he said. For the modern materialist scientist, the story ends like a bad dream. He's talking about Big Bang. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance in his own mind. He is about to conquer the highest peak in his own mind. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. I'm talking about St. Augustine, the real father of creation ex nihilo, and everyone got on board with that. Jastrow also has this great quote, now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world, a Christian biblical view, creation ex nihilo. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time in a flash of light and energy. This book I'm reading, great textbook actually for your science textbook for your homeschooling high school students. Is Jastrow correct? Should the Big Bang be understood as it is by some as proving the existence of God and the divinely inspired truth of the Bible? Not necessarily. We shouldn't, but it certainly nudges it strongly in that direction. Science can't do that. But here's the point. In 1965, there are a few final confirmations that Big Bang is really, really strong that were occurring between 1927 and 1965, those 38 years. In 1965, they found the cosmic microwave background radiation, which ended up being really important to Wolfgang Smith and some Catholics that did some more great work on that. And those 38 years, then the leftists around the world, Red China also followed Soviet Russia in condemning any cosmologist who wanted to do anything other than steady state cosmology and would put you to death for affirming Big Bang cosmology. Now, they all laid down their arms in the late 60s. Nature magazine here in America, the kind of establishment of secular science all started to say, that's fine, we'll just take it. We'll just take it from them. And that's why everyone out here thinks, a lot of people you talk to, most people I talk to, think that Big Bang was against us. A lot of people don't know as a Catholic priest that was the discoverer of the Big Bang. They don't understand the stakes of the game. Andrew, I want to get you in here. So I don't know what you know about the history of this, but I think it's important, sorry for the long opening monologue, but it's important to give it a narrative form, because what we had was, if you can't beat them, join them. And I want people to start this show to see that they've been the victims of a widespread propaganda, if you can't beat them, join them campaign.
Before we do that, apparently there's a banger here in chat. It says Young Earth all the way, no argument, case settled. So should we just stop the show here?
Okay, there it is.
There it is, case settled.
Honestly, bro,
right. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Yeah. You convinced me. Yeah.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Right. Do like and subscribe. And you got to hit the notification bell too, people. But anyway, so subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. But that is a very honest reiteration of what I feel like when I wind up in conversations with Young Earth people. There's a I'm just being honest. You can convince me of anything if you show me the evidence, right? I'm a Christian because of all the evidence. I mean, it's just the overwhelming evidence. I love that the shroud, which disillusioned my young 3rd or 4th grade brain when they said that it had been overturned by science. I love that the shroud now can be basically proven on 6 separate dating tests and again, they're like cotton swab tests, all kinds of tests. That's what I mean. Science. There are hundreds of those. Dummies only have heard of carbon-14 tests, which only go up to about 50,000 years because it's organic matter. There are dozens, hundreds of dating tests, and a lot of the best dating is actually relative dating using sedimentology. I'll describe some of that in today's show with my limited knowledge of geology. But we can't take it when it's good for, say, the shroud or the tilma. Science does all these tests, or the Our Lady of All Nations wooden statue at Akita. Oh, let's test the tears. This is real tears. She cried 111 times. We can't take science then and then just be skeptics the rest of the time. And I understand institutional trust is low. Some conspiracies aren't theories, but are facts. But when you get corroboration pointing to an old cosmos, particularly a corroboration that resoundingly is a W for the Christian theology of the beginning, cosmology of the beginning, we don't want to just, no offense, be like the guy that's like, hey, Young Earth all the way, and just I'm going to shut my brain off to what the book of nature is telling me here. There's the book of scripture, which we're going to deal with Andrew, but there's the book of nature, and I don't know, does the narrative form help at all, Andrew? I mean, you've heard some of this stuff before, but what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that was a great intro. It's a great way of showing that there is no contradiction between faith and science when it's done properly. There's the book of nature is the way God wrote reality, not only natural law, but also, of course, the natural sciences, which are unfortunately underappreciated by many Catholics in the world, especially in the traditionalist sectors where you and I both reside. I mean, the reason why I'm not a Young Earther is because those who typically will promote that position will not use any scientific argumentation involved, or at least respond to the variety of argumentation that science gives us. And I think it was the perfect point that you said. We can't, accept science when it's going to tell us the veracity of the Shroud of Turin or the Tilma of Guadalupe or, Akita, and then just throw it away without giving any argumentation. That's just irresponsible. I mean, I was reading in preparation for this show, the beginning of St. Augustine's On the Literal Interpretation of Genesis. And in the beginning of that text, he talks about how there are some people who will just very, very triumphalistically say to non-believers, this is what scripture says about science, and you have to believe it, even though these individuals, though they might be well-versed in scripture, St. Augustine says these people are not well-versed in, the science or the philosophy of that time, and that proves to be a stumbling block and a scandal for those potential Christians. He says that those people are going to laugh at every line of scripture. They're going to say our prophets were wrong and our religion is false because a certain Christian has a faulty interpretation of the science. Now, Augustine is a lot more in line with the church fathers than most people have him believe or are led to believe. But nevertheless, throughout his book On the Literal Interpretation of Genesis, he'll say time and time again that science and scripture don't contradict. If it's definitive, this is another place. This is me giving a paraphrase, but he says if it's definitively proven, if something is definitively scientifically proven that goes against what scripture says, then we have to find a way to make scripture fit with that in our exegetical methods. So
Of course.
Augustine's certainly not a evolutionist, and I don't think he's even he wouldn't hold to the billions of years model. But at the end of the day, the framework that he gives in the beginning of his book on Genesis are principles that can be applied to us today who have more reliable scientific inquiry and tools.
Yeah, I mean, we're that's fine. We can jump all the way to Augustine, but he's noted as I studied this in Rome at a pontifical university. I just took a class on just Augustine's Creation ex nihilo, and I was taken at the same time at not the Gregorianum, but at Angelicum. I was taking a class on science and revelation with a professor from the Observatory Romano, or Italian Vatican Observatory, the largest commission on cosmologists in the world. We have several fine ones. And these two classes just really excited me about the things that I kind of already knew. I'd been basically a geology minor before I knew I wanted to study philosophy. And my brother is a PhD, my dad's a master's, and my uncle studied geology. So I'm kind of from that background, and I was getting really excited by studying the philosophy of science. And Augustine, who lived in an era that legitimately, they still pooped in the ground, right? Like, this is not that. We have to be honest about what they knew and what they didn't know. Now, was the average literacy higher at reading books? Did they benefit the smart men from having it harder, from the more difficult conditions of learning and academic rigor? Absolutely. And that's why when you're lifting heavier weights, it makes you stronger. So I think the overall intelligence of smart men in St. Augustine's day, certainly in St. Thomas's day, you just read St. Thomas and you're like, anybody that can make it through, chapter 4 of the De Ante et Essentia and understand everything that's going on and not have to sit there and if you think you're smart, go try. It's definite, but it's hard. So there was something in the water, and there's something in the primordial conditions that made their geniuses hyper geniuses. But the really unimportant, hard sciences hadn't even developed yet. And there's a whole Enlightenment story as to removing the accidents of being and studying them as if they were being qua being, to use the whole Heideggerian model. That is really tragic and has been really bad for the world. The Enlightenment, everyone knows I'm a huge critic of it. But it, along with the mostly bad that we got out of the Enlightenment, one thing that it made rigorous was the sciences in their limited scope of what they've done. Now, they've been blocked off from studying formal cause and final cause and all these things I've been talking about in recent shows that have debilitated them. But we certainly have a million more tools, right? I mean, look how I'm lecturing you guys now, or whatever, or coming to you. This dialogue between me and my friend is being, shot out over bandwidth to 10,000 plus people. That's indisputable. We have tools that make measurements and make calibrations so much easier, and enables us to stand on the shoulders of others and look past where they've looked before. And I'm not much of an admirer of science, truth be told. Neither is my brother, who's a PhD. He's always critiquing scientism. It doesn't offer truth, but it offers strong evidence. And what I would submit to you guys before we get underway, talking some about St. Augustine, talk about St. Gregory of Nyssa, all the other patristics, is that St. Augustine would be, I would bet my life on this proposition. If he were alive today, I don't think I've ever said this corny boomerish expression. If this old dead guy, Saint, were alive on Earth today, he would agree with me. No, he would be absolutely vindicated. I mean, Stephen Hawking, aggressive atheist who went to Epstein Island, Stephen Hawking, who hated religion, hated Christianity, was like, we can't deny, I have the dense quote somewhere, but I'm full of notes tonight. We cannot deny that the Big Bang is basically exactly what St. Augustine was teaching with his creation ex nihilo, and this is why it scared the Red Chinese, the Soviet Russian, the Marxists. This is why it scared the scientism crowd in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s in America and England. These guys have committed their lives to a false idol of science, and they don't know what to do because, as who is it? Let me see. As the guy who's in charge of propaganda in Soviet Russia, he's in charge of culture and scientific orthodoxy in Russia. He's Stalin's main man. As he said, you cannot accept, if you're a committed materialist, you simply can't accept that the universe had a beginning in time that looks exactly like the old myth of what the Christians have always believed were the case. I'll read one more time the Robert Jastrow quote. For the modern materialist scientist, the story ends like a bad dream. He's scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, the way really Einstein was in the early 1920s, he's greeted by a band of theologians, think Augustine, who have been sitting there for centuries. Now, okay, so we have that. Augustine would be thrilled knowing whether or not there's a few, 6, 5, 4 more significant digits behind what science and science alone has disclosed is the likely age of the cosmos. We're not talking about evolution, so dummies, don't make that correlation. That's part of the PSYOP, as the materialists have recovered since 1965. It's part of the if you can't beat them, join them propaganda. The age of the Earth. So it has 5 or 6 more significant digits than was assumed from people who were like, we have no science for geology, and so we're going to tabulate it from this non-literal Genesis book, which is what Augustine and others did. Augustine, Gregory of Nyssa, they were literally like, I don't think Genesis is fully literal. I think the days are, not 24-hour periods necessarily. But they still had, because they had no other way of measuring the age of the universe or the age of the Earth, they still were like, well, this is non-literal, but I'm going to treat it like it's literal and tabulate the age of the Earth from that. That's just not having the right tools for the job. What they had the right tools for was to be the nosy Parkers, the smarty pantses, the early birds getting the worm, who are there, like Robert Jastrow says, already sitting, that band of theologians, the smarty pantses, waiting for dumb secular science to catch up to them. And that's what the Big Bang did. And I don't think Augustine was a million more times committed to the proposition that the universe must have a beginning in time for there to be a creator than he was what the specific number was. Okay, so with that, I would say, Andrew, react to that intuition.
Yeah, I think that's good and correct because, like I said, in the beginning of his literal commentary on Genesis, he says, well, okay, if there is something that's definitively proven to be scientifically correct, then we will make Scripture work with it because the two books, divine Scripture and the Book of Nature, can't contradict. So if he were around today, it's possible he would have found, or he would find the evidence from sedimentary dating and so on and so forth quite persuasive. I mean, that's not something I know a lot about. So I'm really interested to hear more about that from you or maybe from Greg in a future episode, because I think that's the piece of the puzzle that's missing in this entire conversation. Because I mean, anybody can go and read, the Father's commentaries on these things, and they're good and they should be a part of the conversation. Don't get me wrong, but the big thing that's missing is the using of these scientific methods. And if you don't think it's correct, then you have to intelligibly critique it. You can't just throw it away.
We'll talk about the science some in the first one. I wanted Greg to join us tonight because he gave me a lot of materials. He was busy tonight with doing geology, but I wanted to have you noticed, because I have a lot of friends who are young Earth creationists. I'm surprised how many friends I have who are young Earth creationists, and they're all a lot. My friends tend to be as smart crowd. You have some young earth creationist friends. You have smart friends. We're guys who run in smart circles because we have, I guess, smart interests. It sounds like we're patting ourselves on the back. It's great.
You guys are awesome. You guys are just amazing.
Gentlemen and scholars.
We're gentlemen and scholars. But here, I would say the discourse a little bit, like I also have some Sede friends. The discourse gets a little bit Sede-ish, doesn't it? It gets a little bit where we're no longer talking in a way where it's like, hey, what? Well, let me share one more story. In law school, the first year of law school, no one studied any of the 1L subjects before because there's no pre-law. There's it's politics majors, some science majors, it's some lit majors, a lot of philosophy people. No one studied law. So in those 1L classes, talking crim law, torts, property law, contracts, civil procedure. People don't even really know what the subject matter looks like their first couple weeks of law school. Like, what's civil procedure? That's going to be interesting. There's a really interesting phenomenon that happens. You take crim law and the law profs who do this kind of hide the ball game. They get people talking about, close case law where it could go this way or it could go the opposite way, the verdict. Do it in torts, do it in contract, do it in property. Everyone's having these great discussions because they don't have these weird like nest eggs they have to guard. These little ideological golden eggs that they feel are their babies. And it's not like any of the poli-sci majors. They're used to, you go in and probably 90 to 95% of the poli-sci profs out there are on the side of the liberal kids, and they kind of make a cottage industry out of picking on the token conservatives, or maybe they're a little nicer about it, but everyone's guarding their egg. They know. No one's doing that in law school, and it's lovely because you have these big lawyerly conversations. You're learning to be a lawyer, and no one really cares about, is this a model penal code jurisdiction or a common law jurisdiction, in this state, in the state of Colorado? How do they define second degree murder in the state of New York? Well, that's, the highest type of murder you can get unless the person who's killed is a cop. No one's got their preconceived notions, right? But then, and my friend Emily pointed this out to me in law school, then you come to con law. And all the preconceived notions come back, and people are rooted into their positions, and they're defending them. And it feels like that petty undergrad poli-sci class, and it kind of feels like everything else in our country now. And it's unfortunate because that's how I feel when I'm talking to my Sede friends, and I'll tell them like, hey, I think there's maybe a 1% chance you're right, and I'll give you more credit than I give to other dissenter types in the church whose premises self-contradict. So I'll give you guys that, but this is the most I can give. Sedes tend to be really rooted in, and like they're talking to you like you're a sellout, like you're a normie, like you're not the guy that they respect in these other ways. That's the tenor that my young earth creationist conversations have always followed. And I've gotten in these since I was studying geology first year or two of college. Have you noticed that?
Among the people who I have spoken with, some of them are very, very triumphalistic and dogmatic, and they won't really unpack it too much other than giving you a list of quotations from the fathers, which I will concede that. I've studied the fathers for years, and all of them, the majority of the fathers will say that it's less than 6,000 years. That's their opinion. Now, there are one or two where it might be a little bit different. Like even Augustine falls in that camp, but
we'll get to that.
Yeah, but people will they'll speak in this way because they'll argue that all of these quotations prove that it's magisterial because it was taught by bishops everywhere across the world at all times, and because it's magisterial following their argumentation, they won't really engage in any of the scientific argumentation. They'll kind of just brush it aside. Although there are people who make that argument, but at the same time, our modern magisterium, like for certainly Pope Francis, Pope Benedict XVI, and John Paul II, have all said, as sitting Pope in their ordinary papal magisterium, that they're old earthers. They're some of them might have even gone so far as to be evolutionists, which we wouldn't follow in for variety of scientific and philosophical reasons. But I think they're a lot more dogmatic with it because they think it might be defined, which I'm not particularly convinced on that fully yet.
Well, if they are, then the analogy between young earthers and sedes that I made just about the tone of voice and kind of haughty skepticism breaks down, and they would actually become sedes, right? Because it's not just the post-conciliar popes have endorsed old earth. I'm not, again, dummies, stay woke, stay frosty. We're not talking about evolution. We're talking about young earth, old earth.
A lot of people on Twitter are saying that about evolution.
Yeah, they're just
like saying, "Oh, we're not old Earth because of evolution." And
yeah, they're just, you got to look, man. You got to drink your coffee before you watch the show. They're totally different things. We're not talking about the biology. I reject macroevolution, and I'm not talking about what Pius said in Humani Generis. I'm talking about what Pius XII, a preconciliar pope, the last preconciliar pope, said about old Earth when he addressed, I think in the late, forgetting when it was, so I won't try to date it. But what he said about old Earth, it's very, very likely about Big Bang theory. So, yes, so we would actually have sedevacantism being, I guess, correct if
it would depend on the level of assent, right? I mean, because they'll take the conversation to magisterial talking points, which is legitimate. But if you do it just to avoid the science, it kind of bypasses a major important thing, because there's different levels of assent that you'd have to give to propositions. So like the highest proposition would be something that's explicitly dogmatically defined, like an ex cathedra or a conciliar statement. A rung below that would be ordinary universal magisterium, and you wouldn't have to you'd have to assent to it with faith if that would be correct. So I think that's where a lot of their argumentation and kind of the more triumphalistic spirit comes from, that because they think that it's with certitude from the faith.
Yeah, well, but my greater point was that, I mean, this is like a faithful kid Catholic science book. It's great.
You want to show the cover of that so people can see it?
Yeah, this is amazing. And so this is just all on, it's like a whole 2 chapters on Big Bang, and there's another one on quantum theory, which is my personal favorite. But the point is, it's got just pages and pages of quotes by modern popes that are rolling with the science, and they're like, look, the main point they keep coming to is this is a matter of science, not faith. The age of the earth. That is one of the, if you don't like the hard sciences, I was always stuck out from my family. I didn't care so much about the hard sciences. That's why I didn't keep going in geology. There's a name for that. Geology. It has nothing to do with the anagogical truths that there's areas of overlap, right? The most important area of overlap is that one I left off the diving board in tonight's show with, which was, if Einstein had been right when he said that in 1917 with special and general relativity or whatever, and he went ahead and somehow he was claiming to have scientifically proven what he wanted to and what all of secular science wanted, that the universe was eternal, that would have been a big blow, not a deal breaker. Thomas addresses this in a short text that I studied again in grad school called On the Eternality of the Universe. But it would have been a major blow, if not a complete devastation to the Christian model. That's not what happened. These guys weren't running the show. They couldn't control. They were doing good science, in other words, because they admitted, wow, this is a surprise. It was a surprise to atheists. It was a happy surprise for Christians. And the atheist set worldwide, Soviet Russia, Red China, America, Britain, they were mad. And they were like, wow, I guess the Catholics are happy. I guess the Catholics are the theologians sitting on the other end. That is an example of an overlapping scientific and theological truth. That's what the Bible's on. The men who wrote the Bible, the setting in life is at Sim Laban. The truths that are inspired are theological truths, right? They don't know everything. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, those guys didn't have divinely infused knowledge about everything. They didn't know what your Segway was going to look like, 2,000 years ago. They didn't know who was going to win the big ball game, the World Series in 2015. That's not what divine inspiration means. So they're operating with that scientific framework of an ancient, which was next to nothing. And yet it's amazing that they managed to get through the small amount of scientific and theological overlap to the truths about creation ex nihilo. That's what's important. The age of the earth, the fact that there's consensus there, guess what? Also, they had consensus on other things not related to faith or morals. Like if you would have said, hey, do you like stonewashed blue jeans? St. Jerome, St. Augustine, they would have all said, well, the correct answer is no. They would have said,
of course not.
Stonewashed blue jeans. That doesn't mean stonewashed blue jeans don't exist. That's just a fact about the natural world that didn't yet exist, or an artifact. If you asked
them if they liked Marvel movies, they would have laughed in your face. All of them.
Well, they would have been like, "What's a movie? What's Marvel?" And many of them
what
did
is
have
English?
a premonition in your face. Yeah, what is English?
What is a Spider-Man?
And if you said Spider-Man, then why are you gay? Well, you're an adult that watches movies about comic books. Okay, dude. But what's a comic book also? But I mean, you get what I'm saying? So they also would have said, hey, what's a Segway? What's a Ford Probe? What's a Lamborghini? These are technologies that weren't developed yet. And what I want to talk about mainly is get to the theology and the Hebrew. You read Hebrew. You also read Greek. I can only read the Latin. And I'm only a Thomistic philosopher. But I want to get to some of that, but I want to frame it properly. And the proper framework is, this is not one of those areas where the modern popes are being modernistic. This is one of the areas where the popes are understanding the harmony between fides et ratio better than the people that take the, I think, accidental consensus on a non-faith or morals matter too seriously, as if it were a matter of faith and morals on the patristics.
Yeah, I think the very fact that the modern popes have said it's a permissible opinion kind of entirely diffuses the triumphalism that they're trying to get by arguing it's ordinary and universal magisterium. So I think that the permissions that we are allowed to have, and the fact that many modern theologians who are in good standing with the church, who are Orthodox, who are not modernists, say, yeah, this is a permissible opinion. This is good. I mean, a lot of this is probably one of the best English Bibles that there are, the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. It's written by a lot of personal friends who I know the languages very well, know the fathers very well, and follow the magisterium in all things. And it explicitly says in a lot of material that has nihil obstats from the bishops today that this Genesis 1 through 3, or whichever parts there's lots of symbolism going on there. It's not strictly intended to be what would reality look, or what would it have looked like if you had your iPhone camera. Even going back to what Augustine said, for those who don't know, we've been throwing around this Augustinian opinion, is that he held that the book of Genesis chapter number 1, which is where the 7 days of creation are mentioned, he held that wasn't supposed to be taken as literal 24-hour cycles. And we can get into the reasons why he thought that. There's actually a variety of reasons. But he held that this Genesis 1 chapter is just an analogous way of describing how the created world is ordered and governed. He didn't think it was literal 24-hour cycle. So he's the greatest Latin father, the greatest writer in the West, held this opinion. So it's perfectly, I think, orthodox for us to hold a similar opinion.
But the weird thing is, this always catches me off guard. I'm always like, well, Augustine, I mean, the young earth is a thing that was brought out in the 60s. The young earth, old earth dichotomy is language that's anachronistic. It was brought out by evangelicals. It was an evangelical thing. But so they're superimposing modern assumptions on it, and it was largely repopularized among Catholics in the 90s by the Colby Center. But it is true and accurate to say that all of the patristics, I think the young earth creationist Catholics and evangelicals alike are exaggerating the importance of this, kind of like I would think they'd be exaggerating the importance of it if they thought it was de fide that none of the patristics knew what blue jeans were. But they all do. It is, I must admit here, Augustine included, they all did sort of just presuppose that the earth was somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 years, right? Even Augustine and even Gregory of Nyssa, both of whom did not think the 6 days account was literal.
Yeah, that's correct, because Augustine, he says this in his literal commentary on Genesis. He says that chapter 1 he thinks is an allegory, but then he'll say chapter 2 is where history begins, is what he'll say. So he thinks 2 through 50 is historical. He explicitly says he believes it to be one of the historical books. He even compares it to First Kings in regard to its clarity, he says. And this is the opinion of the majority of the fathers. I mean, all of them will say that it's meant to be taken as history, although you will get guys like Augustine, and then from what you've told me, Nyssa, I haven't read Gregory Nyssa's treatment of it, that chapter 1 could be interpreted as non-literal. I mean, even the Catechism, right? The Catechism of the Catholic Church, but it says, very clearly that Genesis is using figurative language there. So it's a permissible opinion. Like we're not heretics we're not deniers of the faith for holding an opinion of the church as we're allowed to have. That there's a great preponderance of figurative language, especially in the first chapters of Genesis.
So that's a hard one to get over, that the 6 days of creation can be conformed on at least largely Augustinian analysis to the day-age theory. This could be actually a really good, I think, analog for what was going on. I was just looking back through Emmanuel Levinas, who's a modern contemporary continental philosopher, on this book, Time and the Other, about like what really is time. What really is time? And it is a sort of rational animal or rational intellect, incorporeal, like angel thing, because what really does it mean that there are, according to cosmology, solar system studies, solar physics, geology, geophysics, sedimentology, paleontology, radiometric dating, stratigraphy, ice cores, plate tectonics, sedimentation patterns, tree rings, even coral growth bands, independently corroborating data from nuclear physics, astronomy, chemistry, glaciology, paleontology. All of these sciences say, I mean, that's a lot. All of them agree the age of the earth is between 2 and 4.5 billion years old. Okay, so that's not all a psyop. And I just told you that the Big Bang, which is what helps to date from one of those many angles, the cosmos and the earth, was a great disappointment to the psyoper Enlightenment scientists. They didn't like it. So this is not part of a grand scheme. The skeptics can't skeptic this one. They can't say, oh, well, that's just, this is part of this. They can't flat earther you and just say, oh, everything's BS, man. Don't believe it. So I kind of forget where I was going with that. But Augustine was, he was, I think the way to look at this is he ends up sort of agreeing with the other guys that are taking the 6 days as literal days instead of whatever it means to receive them anagogically. But he's coming up with the same, the universe is 5,000 to 6,000 years old, just because that's just what everyone was saying at the time. He wasn't weighing in on that. It's not a theological matter what the age of the earth is. What's a theological matter is, did it have a creator? Did it have a creation in time? As the Pontifical Biblical Commission tells us, was there a first man and woman who freely chose sin, stained us all with original sin, and necessitated a redeemer? Those all have to be literal and historical, and they are. But it's odd that Augustine and Gregory of Nyssa both say both creation accounts, which take place over time, couldn't have been right, because they believe that Sirach chapter 19 says that all things were created simul. This is also inerrant scripture. All things were created at once. So it's weird that they're totaling all this together and still coming up with the same sort of groupthink on, oh, I guess we just date the Earth at 5,000 to 6,000 years old.
Yeah, because I don't know Nissa, but like it's because Augustine explicitly will give you he'll concede that Genesis 1 is not to be taken literally, but it's because they continue to add up the genealogies. I mean, that's why they still hold that opinion, is because Augustine, like all of the fathers before and after him, when we were discussing this matter, they will add up the genealogies and they'll say, well, it's less than 6,000 years. I mean, that's why he holds that opinion still, because he's holding to the historicity of the rest of the book of Genesis.
Right. I mean, that's fair, but I don't think that, again, that's one of the accidental properties of a theological article, an article of theology. That's not one of the essential properties. There's nothing essential about the age of the universe, and there's minor variation. Think about it. If this were a divinely revealed, divinely inspired theological truth, it's got to be 5,700 years old or whatever, 5,712 years old in 47 days. Then there would be no natural variance between all of them. This is an anachronism, I say. I don't know if you agree with this. We talked about it some last night. We talked for like 4 hours last night, so I forget where you ended up on this. But if this were a divinely inspired truth, then one, the science would all be proving it, kind of like it proves the shroud, kind of like it proves creation ex nihilo. So it can't be a divinely inspired truth what the age of the earth is. And number two, they would all have the exact same number, all of the patristics. They wouldn't get a range, right? Or they wouldn't be like, oh, it's about 5,000 years old. That qualifies in our modern categories as young earth. They would all have like a magic number, and the Holy Spirit would have revealed that to them. That's not what any of them have, by my read.
Yeah, I'm not just to be clear, I'm not a young earther, because I mean, it seems to me that the science is pointing in the opposite direction. I mean, if people want to engage the science, I'd be more than happy to hear them out. But most of the fathers don't give a precise date. The main one that I was looking at in preparation for this is actually not even a church father. His name's Julius Africanus. He wrote, and I think about the year in the 2nd century, he gave a precise date. It was like 5,500 and something or other. But all of the other fathers don't really give a precise date. They don't really wade into calculating it, at least from what I've read in preparation for this. But the ones who do topic, they'll just say not 6,000 is basically what they say. So they don't wade into giving specific numbers. Most of them don't.
But what do you mean not 6,000? Not as big?
Not 6,000 years. They don't think it's 6,000. They think it's less than 6,000 years. That's what they'll say.
So just the Sumerians, who we know lived 60. That's a convenient number, because I was just thinking I was going to use this example. The Sumerians, who were like Mesopotamians, we know they lived between 4,000 and 4,500 years BC. And so they just didn't exist because that's older than 6,000 years, or would they? I mean,
and then precisely, and that's why I mean, things like this are reasons why it's become more popular, especially since the late 1800s, among Catholic biblical scholars, to say that these parts of the book of Genesis have to likely be not as historical as we once thought they were, right? There's the great scholar Marie-Joseph Lagrange, who was a French Dominican, and he was always in commune with the church. And he makes points he actually explicitly makes that point in his book on the Old Testament, where he says, listen, we're making all these new discoveries and these new innovations while we're digging stuff out of the ground. We're learning that these civilizations are much older than we had first anticipated. And also, while we are digging up these, it's a really, really good example that you mentioned, the Sumerians. While they're digging up the Sumerians, they're also finding that the Sumerians, in their record keeping and their own histories, that they will also have really, really big ages. Like Adam lived 800 something years old. Methuselah was 900. All of these, the great patriarchs of the book of Genesis, have very lengthy ages. We see the Sumerians also gave very lengthy ages to their own monarchs and kings. Now, that's led some scholars to argue, okay, perhaps the book of Genesis is intending not to give, you know, accurate literal history, but is intending to write in this genre of, you know, political succession, you know, political, I don't know if propaganda is the right word, but perhaps it was not trying to give as strict history as we once thought. Perhaps it's more in the genre of this this Sumerian stuff, actually.
Yeah, maybe it was trying to impart, if you read a few more chapters into Genesis, pre-Diluvian, post-Diluvian dichotomy in terms of the way that humans were almost, not quite, not theologically, we didn't have our nature changed the way Adam and Eve did pre and post fall, but almost there was a human nature, natural life change before and after. Maybe they're trying to, maybe science can be a friend if you do it well, which is what the true Catholic belief is. Wow, that's cool. You know, people lived longer before the flood, didn't they? Wow. If the science is turning that up, then perhaps, and I know this is a new thought for a lot of the, I don't want to say Judaizing, I want to say Protestantizing Catholics out there, maybe science isn't something to be feared. Maybe it's not all a giant psyop. You know, I mean, I don't hear a lot of people, I don't get much pushback when I say we've used 6 dating techniques for the shroud after whoever it was, those Jews or whoever it was that ran that trick by pulling the repaired patch of the shroud. It had been repaired in the late 1270s, 80s from the fire of Chambray in France. The really tricky move, and they really got us in 1988. Really made skeptics out of a lot of us. But we've run 6 absolute dating techniques since then, and they've all shown, oh no, it goes back to right around 30 AD.
We even had recently the very interesting study done about the earthquake at the time of Christ's crucifixion. That was recorded that geologists found and have record data of. I mean, again, it's like Christians, we get very excited whenever science confirms scripture, but it's like then we want to turn our back on science whenever like it doesn't adhere to our, I guess, preferences.
Well, there are a lot of the same dating techniques that people were getting excited about. I got no pushback for citing what confirmed the shroud, the 6 tests after the 1988 stirrup test. But I get pushback anytime I'm like, look, maybe there's a difference between a theological truth and a scientific truth. It's good news. It's not bad news. We don't need to steal defeat from the jaws of victory. 20th century science, particularly when you get into Big Bang and quantum theory, is a giant victory. It's a giant middle finger to materialist secular science. And I just feel like the Protestants, the way they kind of always do, because they have such an anti-intellectualism about them, an anti-intellectual tradition, they're always going to steal defeat from the jaws of victory because they don't know any better. They're kind of like your, lovable, retarded cousin at the family reunion. But now I see Catholics doing that. And I'm like, you're taking absolutely the wrong point from what the Big Bang showed and got better and better and better over those 4 decades. It was confirmed time and time and time again, to the point where even the secular scientists who hated the Big Bang because they felt it confirmed Christianity reversed course, take the point they took, and instead they're just like, well, the Earth's a little longer, a little older. The cosmos is a little older. Maybe life is a little older than we thought. Maybe it's a lot older. That's not the theological truth. And what I brought up time and the other with Levinas, it's like, time's absolutely non-linear before humans were here. Like, who cares if the Lord wanted to make things that way, and the science shows that that's how he brought about a kind of developing process, then he did it that way. Why is that? And it went by like a flash because there are no humans in Levinasian sense. There are no human beings to experience it. So yeah, imagine it like it was just a flash. Why does it matter? These people don't care about geology. They don't care about sedimentology. That has nothing to do with theology.
Yeah, I mean, going back to St. Augustine, right? He noted that the book of Genesis does not, it's very intentionally, does not comment on a lot of the very specific ways that the universe came about. He said God could have talked about that if he'd wanted to, but he chose not to because he wanted to focus more on the theological meanings that are going to come forth from that. And obviously, you've said it once, but it bears repeating that the main things that we need to take away from the book of Genesis is that God created everything ex nihilo, that he created everything good, that he created man and woman, Adam and Eve, you know, they're historical characters, and that they had this original justice that they lost by sin. I mean, Augustine says time and time again, because he brings up some of the different theories that were around in his day and age. Like, okay, what about this fact of, you know, what this scientist says about, you know, the creation of the earth? Or what about this theory and theory? Augustine basically says, okay, listen, I'm not really interested in going through all of these different theories that are proposed right now. What I really want to do is get to the theological meaning. That was his main thing. Now, obviously, because he lived centuries before us, he's not going to hold the same positions that we are going to do, but the principles that he lays out can are what found, you know, even Catholics holding to an old earth, right? Yeah. And another really great thing that came to mind is what Pope Leo the 13th of you know, blessed memory. I wish he was a saint. He's great on all things, specifically all things biblical exegesis. He says in his encyclical Providentissimus Deus, which is about biblical exegesis, that knowledge of the natural sciences will be a great help to the teacher of sacred scripture, by which he can more easily discover and refute fallacious arguments of this kind drawn up against the sacred books. So it's if anybody wants to be engaging in these conversations, it can't just be the theological datum. You really do need to do the work of also addressing the various scientific arguments that seem to be in favor of old earth. And if there are people who contest that, they should debate it, you know. Would you reread that Providentissimus Deus? Yeah. This is Leo the 13th. Yeah. Again, he lays out a lot of principles that are useful for the exegesis of scripture. He says, knowledge of the natural sciences will be of great help to the teacher of sacred scripture, by which he could more easily discover and refute fallacious arguments of this kind drawn up against the sacred books. So following the principles that Leo the 13th lays out and that Augustine laid out, you know, we really need to use these scientific arguments in these discussions, right? I mean, like if you think that these, however many, I think Tim, you and I were talking, you said there's over 100 different independent tests is what you told me. If that's the case, well, then you have to bring argumentation showing as to why it's wrong. You can't just hand wave it away. It's not in line with the Catholic intellectual understanding of how to exegete scripture. Yeah, precisely. That's why I didn't, that's such a beautiful quotation by Leo. And we know, you know, John Paul II, I think, does engage in more than a little bit amount of modernism. And that's why I'm always sort of hesitant at this point to cite him. But Fides et Ratio makes some beautiful points in the exact same direction. And like, I want to get into some of the actual geology, but what's going to happen with our, there are people in chat. I wouldn't mind turning to the comments in chat. What's going to happen though with the young earth creationist is they're just going to stick it on, hey, well, this part of, you know, Genesis 1 or this part of Genesis 2, you know, it's literal because it's literal. It's like, and we don't want to deal with Augustine. We don't want to deal with the fact that Sirach chapter 19 says all things were created together. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm open to either. In some sense, I don't understand the emotionalism, the amount of energy that young earth people put into it. They always say this, don't you just feel like worthless? Don't you feel insignificant if time were vast or space were vast? No, I feel like if God created all that and he created earth at the center of it all and only life here, like not at all. I never understood that argument either. Like we were talking about on the walk. Like God also created Adam before Jesus, and Jesus was greater. Like I don't. Yeah. Like to me, it's like, does God always have to start off with his best, like right away? I don't get it. To me, it's like, yeah, Jesus came along. His best creations came along much Jesus later. Isn't a creation. Well, no, of course. I mean, I was thinking more about Our Lady, but like, you know what I mean? Like Our Lady, for example, like, you know, like
that she's greater than all of us, and she came along later than even like human beings did. So it's like I don't understand like that insecurity.
It's honestly a sentimentality and in an insecurity. Thank you. It's an intellectual insecurity I don't understand. They all make this point to me. Well, doesn't it make you feel insecure? No, I feel just that's not how I think things through. I'm just I don't want to hit you with Ben Shapiro, facts don't. But that's how I try to lead. I'm like, look, if the Lord chose to create this way, and he created all that space and all through all this time, and he still got to little old Timothy J. Gordon, basketball extraordinaire. Then I mean, like, I'm pretty flat. I don't think through it like that way. I really and sincerely don't. I'm flattered that I was created at all. And yes, I think there's well over 100 ways you could corroborate between all of those different sciences, that none of whom are psyoping us because they were caught off guard by the beginning in time of the universe that ended up through the CMBR enabling us to start dating stuff in an absolute way. Yeah, that's a great point.
Like that's like science is not comfortable with the fact that there's a beginning to the universe, and to get like the billions of years of age for the Earth, they have to admit that there's a beginning, and they don't really feel that comfortable doing that.
Right. And that's one thing. Look, that's one thing. That's why people watch this show. Yeah. I'm gonna hit you with some narrative reshift. And that's what you need to get out of this retrenchment. Mm-hmm. When people are like, oh, young Earth, older. Like, here's the thing. It doesn't matter. But if I just tell you it doesn't matter, you're not going to believe me.
Andrew's getting his charger.
Yeah, no, he let me know.
Yeah.
Then so I'll happily sort of monologue through. I was going to do this anyway. It's really, really important that you understand that the turns of events in the late 20s and 30s with both Big Bang cosmology and then at the very large macroscopic and quantum theory, quantum mechanics at the very, very small in the same decade through relativist, physicalist, determinist, materialists, atheists for a loop. And don't steal defeat from the jaws of victory. And that's why I framed it all this way. It's like these guys were freaked out. The other team, the atheists who've been running science since the Enlightenment, were freaked out by what happened with the Big Bang. And they were all in their honest moments, which were really their dishonest moments, because it was between 1927 and when they laid down their arms in 1965. They were all saying, well, come on, Big Bang, this is just Christian theology. Big Bang cosmology. So that's really, really important. Now, I want to say this. There's something I want to say that I want Andrew to hear. Are you back, Andrew?
Yeah, sorry, my laptop was dying.
Oh, yeah. That's bad. You can't let a laptop die in the middle of if you're planning on using it. I say that. There's a challenge in chat. Let's hear the challenge. And then I do want to get to some of the geology and just say, okay, well, you give your read of this, but we'll hear the challenge first.
It's a good challenge from a priest perspective. So
Great.
Father Adam.
Excellent.
Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Chanel. St. Augustine taught instantaneous creation. St. Ambrose taught 6 literal days. Basil and many others taught 6 literal days. Mm-hmm. It's always been Catholic teaching that it was 6 literal days. It does matter that the earth is 6,000 years old, because otherwise the genealogy of Christ to Adam is not true in its time, that it gives. And he has a follow-up too, if you want to.
Well, instantaneous creation is Catholic teaching because it's in, I'll read you in the Latin if you want, because it's in Sirach chapter 19. I went over it a lot for this show, but in Sirach chapter 19, it says, the creator of all things created all things altogether. So, that's a contradiction. When there's a contradiction in scripture, and in the Latin term in the Vulgate, the official Catholic Bible, is simul, meaning together. So what do? You have to start exegesis. We can't do eisegesis and just say what we want it to mean.
What do those 2 words mean? Sorry, I don't know that.
Reading our own private stuff into scripture is bad. Taking out of scripture what it wants us to take out of it is good. Andrew, I don't know, what would you say? Sirach 19 literally says it was all created at once.
Yeah, that's the Vulgate's translation. It's my understanding that the Greek might not be all at once. It might be all together, or not. Maybe not. I forget which one it is. I don't have the Greek right in front of me, but I've heard people argue that it's only the Vulgate that gives that problem, and that is one of the reasons why Saint Augustine did believe that the first day was not to be taken literally. But it's always been a permitted opinion from Augustine onwards, right? It's never been condemned as heretical. I mean, if Augustine held it and people were allowed to hold it for the past, what would it be, 1600 years or so? If it's been allowed for that long, if it was okay then, it's okay now. It's never been condemned. I will say though that Father's argument that the genealogies thing, I think that's the strongest argument that they have. I mean, you and I talked about this on the phone last night. The strongest argument that I think that young earthers have is that the genealogy from Adam to Christ, which is repeated. Well, there's the genealogy of Adam, which is in Genesis. Then it goes in the book of Chronicles, Adam to David. Then in Luke, Adam to Christ. It's not that long. So I think that's their strongest argument. However, I do think it's at least possible it's permitted to hold that everything before Adam could have certainly been longer, right? I mean, it's a permissible opinion to hold that creation, since it was not meant to be taken literally, or it's a permitted opinion that could have been longer. So I will concede that is a strong point that he brings up, but I don't think it's as ending because of the permissibility. Perhaps you're reading a bit into the text to stretch it a bit out, but I do think that you do need to deal with the scientific argumentation to say it's an illegitimate reading if you think it is one.
Didn't Greg have an interesting point about outside of space and time before there was like a human being on Earth, right? There was something.
Well, no, that's different. Like humans experience time. This is the Emmanuel Levinas point, but that's not relevant here, because if we can use most of the dating techniques that are super reliable are relative dating techniques, then they go together with all sorts of new cutting edge absolute dating techniques. If they're talking about the age of a layer of sediment, or the age of banded iron formations. This is one of the great sort of Rosetta Stones for aging is these banded iron formations, specific widespread rocks that are generally younger than meaning stratigraphically above Earth's oldest rocks and minerals. They can be used a lot. So they're called BIFs, B-I-F, which always cracks me up. If you could show it with the science that, well, there's some, there's all kinds of anagogical, there's all kinds of anagogical reads happening in Genesis. And even throughout 2,000 years, even throughout the first 1,800 years of scripture, hermeneutics, patristic reading, magisterial reading, there's a lot of shifting around. Andrew and I were going through Genesis last night, and you were reading it to me in the Hebrew, and it's very, very clear on a plain text read, a Justice Antonin Scalia type plain text read, that this is not intended to be. It's like in the almost cavemanish ancient Hebrew. I mean, Andrew, you should just go through and read some of it. It's not intended to be like a tome of science or a geology. That's just not what it was either fitted to do or intended to do. So it's not like it took a swing, it being the book of Genesis, and missed. I'm not doubting that there's really historically accurate anthropological components to the timelines and the family trees, the genealogies. That's probably some of the best history in the book of Genesis. But how much time was there, anagogically speaking, between the first day, which could have been an age, the second day, the third day, when I think Augustine's argument is you don't even have the possibility of 24-hour time periods. They didn't have clocks, and they didn't have the sun until the fourth day. So whether or not you like that argument or you dislike it, if each of those first 3 days was an age, if each of them are, you know, 1 billion years old, then you're jumping right to Adam. And depending on how old, you know, they also think they can, after the Cambrian explosion, which is a geologic, kind of well-known fact, like the KT boundary is, the Cambrian explosion is where life was. We think we know where life really begins. You start seeing these fossils. It's very well exampled. But you can have a different argument about where life begins that's at least conceptually differentiable from the argument about where, you know, the life of the earth begins or the life of the cosmos begins. It's just not a theological question. That doesn't mean it has no bearings on things like genealogies. Like Andrew, you just said, I agree, the genealogies are probably accurate, but there's got to be some fudge in there if they contradict, you know, if they start running into major contradictions with basically well-measured facts that we're finding. We don't want to be evangelicals who are afraid of science, you know, hiding our head in the sand.
Yeah, like you said, but just like to recapitulate, Father's point is a good point.
Yeah.
At best, though, it would prove a young humanity, perhaps, but it would not strictly necessitate a young Earth, because you could, if you factor in, like for example, because Augustine and Pope Leo XIII said, okay, use science when you're doing exegesis, guys. You can't put your head in the sand. Use science when you're doing exegesis. If we're using those principles when we're looking at early Genesis, we can say, okay, perhaps, you know, I mean, I haven't looked into the science very much, which is why I'm willing to be, you know, convinced. I want to hear more about it. But okay, perhaps the humanity is younger than we thought it was, but that doesn't strictly prove that the entire cosmos is.
Yeah, I just think we should make, I still don't think that that's a proper theological question. It's not its purview, you know, dating, you know, anthropology. You let anthropology be anthropology. That doesn't mean that Jesus isn't a descendant of, you know, the distaff house he was and the paternal house he was, which are deeply important to, you know, the satisfaction of the Old Testament. I get all that. So that's all, I'm sure, very accurate. But when you're trying to name and be like, well, this means this, and there's no room for the analog or for symbolism in Genesis, that's just you're making assumptions that can't be sustained. There's not a shred of evidence. Let me give you a basic premise. There's not a shred of evidence, not a corpuscle, not a whisper in the real sciences. And I'm talking corroboration from about 20 different sciences that goes in favor of what would be called a 6,000-year Earth. There's not a shred to contradict this. So here's the basic premise, that when you're looking at the layer of the Earth's crust, the older layer sedimentary rocks and formations are located stratigraphically below the younger ones, which are on top of them. And this is called the principle of superposition. Very basic, very demonstrable, very stable, a set of assumptions, suite of assumptions in geology. This is called Steno's simplified principle of superposition. Okay. Now, using this principle, superposition, some of the oldest rocks and minerals on Earth show distinct geochemical signatures. We're not talking about, this is all relative dating. We're not talking about absolute dating. That can be demonstrated in chemistry labs today. Tomorrow you could do it. Indicating deposition, lithification during a very extremely low oxidation, low oxygen environs in the early period of Earth's history. Particularly low oxygen in Earth's atmosphere fluid and in its oceans fluid. So there are examples of this called detrital uraninites and detrital pyrites, which are typically older than 3 billion years old. Okay.
These are things that are found in the soil or in
the in basic stratigraphy 101. These are some basic principles. Like I was telling you about BIFs, the banded iron formations. This is the geology 101 type stuff. Not a psyop. You don't have to buy carbon dating. You don't have to think it's good. We're not talking about these fancy new absolute dating techniques. We're talking about just basic stratigraphy in the Earth's crust. Now, these banded iron formations are super specific and widely seen rocks that pop up that are, like I said before, generally younger than, meaning stratigraphically above, Earth's oldest rocks and minerals. So meaning they're younger than them. BIFs contain geochemical evidence of increasing oxygen conditions, which tells us something. Remember what we're dealing with when we're dealing with a low oxygen environment in Earth's oceans at or near the onset of something called the Great Oxidation Event, which is, again, like a geology kind of 101, maybe 102 class. Most of these BIFs they know from both relative and absolute dating, 2.4 to 2.7 billion years old, right? And there's a lot of stuff below them, older than them. There's several field locations that you can go look at today. My mom and dad had my older brother. My mom was doing this summer field camp, geologic field camp my dad was doing to get his master's at UC Santa Barbara. She was wandering around the mountains in LA and Santa Barbara with my dad during field camp so he wouldn't have to be alone when she was like 7-8 months pregnant. My parents were like hikers. You can go see a lot of these, even on the 5 or on the 405. You can see these, they're called outcroppings, where you can see all, there's like an unconformity where it'll be jutted up over the earth and you can see all these bands. Several field locations contain outcrops ranging from much older, reducing, or the other word would be anoxic rocks without much oxygen, very old, and minerals like these detrital uranonites to younger overlying BIFs. Okay, there's a very famous one called Witwatersrand Basin in South Africa. There's one called the Hammersley Basin in Australia. Famous, just sort of geology 101 you can learn at these outcroppings. And these transects demonstrate changing conditions on Earth from a no or low oxygen period to increasing oxygen. And again, we know the relative ages of these two periods well. So we're still basically just dealing with relative dating, which is super, super reliable. The multiple reducing anoxic field localities from around the globe contain overwhelming evidence for a long, long, long period of time in early Earth history when there was virtually no oxygen. Very anoxic or super low oxygen period in the atmosphere and oceans. And hence there could be no vertebrate life. We need oxygen, right? So there weren't vertebrates. You would expect there not to be, and there weren't in the fossil record there. There are no BIFs being deposited today because of our very different, highly oxidized conditions. The atmosphere and oceanic geochemistry composition is very, very different. And because iron is sequestered and oxidized very differently in the present day. So you don't see the BIFs. So this also helps us to relatively date to that period that they think they can date to. Very simple logic behind establishing relative ages, such as what I just ran through, like kind of 5 posits in geology, comes from superposition, Steno's basic principle. Really, really easy geology 101, as well as the concept of index fossils. Index fossils are like, for example, a Homo erectus bone or footprint has never been observed in a Cretaceous rock formation. Never, not one. You're not going to find a Homo erectus bone like, doubling down when you get aces or whatever. You just, every time you look for it, every time it's not there. A dinosaur bone or a footprint has never been encountered in a Miocene age sedimentary rock. That's because superposition is super basic.
Because the theory is that obviously if the Earth is only 4,000 years old, then dinosaurs and humans had to have lived at the same time.
Yeah, right? there are several takeaways from that sort of most basic, unfailing geological principle. That's one of them. Yes, it's that there's never been a Homo erectus bone in a Cretaceous rock formation. Not one found ever. If you find it, then come throw it in my face. Kind of like we tell the atheists, well, if you find the tomb of Jesus, it's going to be empty. If you find a full tomb, come show me. You can spike the football in the end zone. Similarly, you're never going to find a dino bone or a dino footprint in a Miocene-aged sedimentary rock, just for example. And this is very, very real evidence that doesn't involve this super overhyped technology of carbon-14 dating, which is real. But I know the talking points that a lot of the evangelicals that I went to school with when I was in Dallas studying geology, they would know, they had their talking points lined up. Like I said, with the SETEs against like carbon-14 dating, that's not even old, man. That only dates like things made of carbon, right? So they have to be
like 50,000 years.
Yeah, 50, 60,000 years.
So if it's older than that, then carbon dating is useless.
Yeah, now there are other longer absolute dating techniques that they don't even know about. The kind of part of it you don't even want to tell them, because then they start looking into it and coming up with these fake talking points around them. But so this principle is really basic. I don't know if that helps you at all, Andrew. You were asking about some of the science. I wanted Greg to come on with us tonight, but.
Yeah, the relative dating stuff is quite strong. And I've never really seen anybody address it satisfactorily. Like you said, the main topping point is the carbon 14. But yeah, no, this is the stuff that really interests me, frankly, is the scientific aspect of it. So that was great, I think, for everybody to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, my brother would do it in a way where he could kind of interact with it more. But these are basic things that you see. And what is it? No, sorry, I just can't see. This light is bright. People comment on the light. So I think it's good that, I mean, one, it's a dialogue. You have to I mean, I don't know, Andrew, did you feel like doing any literal reads kind of in closing of what the Hebrew is there?
Can you do that?
Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, starting at 4.
That's interesting.
If you want, we can, although I don't know if we'll lose people, because then we're going to have to start debating about how you perfect and pluperfect, and then this scholar says this and this scholar says that, and that could be a whole other like hour.
Because as you know, the Hebrew doesn't have the pluperfect, so it has to be inferred. But no, we're not even getting into anything argumentative. I want people to hear the caveman language that is ancient Hebrew. I want Steph to have a chuckle.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I mean, your Hebrew's good. I'm just saying it's
you
not
are a gentleman and a scholar, Andrew.
It's not a precise language. I don't know if anybody's ever seen how much larger the English language is than the second largest language in terms of diction, number of words. But these ancient, in Latin's actually a very large language with a lot of different synonyms compared to other ancient languages. But have you ever done this? Just looked up how many words are in English versus Spanish versus Chinese? It's just, there's something to what Churchill said about English-speaking peoples, because it's not the most efficient language, but it's by far the most intelligent, because you just have more words to select. Bigger vocabularies are grown, cultivated from it. Hebrew,
so English has approximately 470,000 words and 600,000 head words. I don't know what that is. Maybe you do. German has about 135. French has 100,000, fewer than 100,000 words.
It's like 10x.
Yeah, we're like, English is so many.
So it's
like, so
English is a genius machine for the verbal. I know you don't believe it because of America and Britain's wasted youth, but it's a genius machine compared to all the other languages. Look up how many words are in ancient Hebrew, Steffi.
Okay.
It's like they have. I don't know. So do you want to just go through starting at verse 4, Andrew, and just show the way it talks?
Ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew is 7,000 words.
Is Andrew gone?
No, I don't think. Oh, wait, maybe. Oh, he's back.
Oh, it's like, did the laptop die?
I can't hear him.
Yeah, we can't hear you, dude.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to his mic. Let me see if I can help on my end. But yeah, ancient Hebrew is 7,000 words. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, 7,000 words.
Let's see.
He says it's not his battery. He doesn't know what's up with his internet.
Okay, sorry.
7,000 words only in Hebrew. So
that's wild.
It makes it literally difficult to even impart meaning, particularly the kind of abstruse theological meaning that would co-attend the description of the beginning of the universe. So, and Hebrew doesn't even really have verb tenses. It's the other
what
thing.
do you remember? Because I know Andrew's having a hard time with his audio right now, but do you remember some of the ancient Hebrew? Was it like caveman? Was it really like caveman speech?
It's like
me likes cookie.
Yeah. And me and Andrew were laughing last night. We were on the phone like 4 hours, kind of puzzling this out because I'm curious too. I mean, like I do agree with what Andrew said about the strongest point. The only really semi-strong point I've ever heard by Young Earth is, okay, so we have the genealogies, which are like a timeline. They're strong because they're like relative dating. They're like anthropological relative dating. And so I agree with what Andrew said. I'm
Maybe
like,
he can just text it to you.
I can be pushed, but yeah, like can you text it on your phone? Like, do like a voice memo, Andrew, on your phone. If we lost Andrew. I was going through just some of the basic geology, and that like uncoupled his laptop from being able to like transport sound. But
transmit sound.
I want
maybe I'll go through some super chats real quick while Andrew's
let's do some super chats.
Okay.
It's a good topic. It's just people have to be reasonable. That's what we're talking about, the foundation of the earth, to borrow a Gandalfian phrase. It's got to be complex, and things can't be expected reductively to be simple.
Sorry, baby spit up a little bit. Sorry. So Gennaro Castellone said, thanks for not backing down from your beliefs, and $10 super chat. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the super chat.
Shane Bonaventure says, getting into it with my parish council 90-year-olds about Adam and Eve being real pushed me towards young earth. My Christocentrism and math study also pushed me toward geocentrism. I'm open to old earth.
Yeah, remember. I know you probably get it, commenter. I forget what your name was, but what was it? This commenter's name, Sephi.
This is Shane Bonaventure.
Shane, yeah. So it's part of the PSYOP that they used. I didn't lean into this that much. After 1965, after the CMBR, the cosmic microwave background radiation, which Robert Sungenis did an amazing documentary on called The Principle. Everyone should go watch it, which shows how it's very arguable what the CMBR means.
Great documentary.
This anisotropic rather than isotropic radiation left over, energy left over from the Big Bang. It presumes the Big Bang's true. I thought it presumes old Earth is true because you're presuming the Big Bang is true. Wolfgang Smith, who Sungenis is leaning on for the documentary, is an old Earth guy. Sungenis is not. So I kind of wondered. When I interviewed him, I was like, oh, I didn't know this wasn't intended to be that kind of show. But it's interesting because after the CMBR was discovered in 1965, and all of these lefty secular science atheists in Soviet Union, China, America, England, Nature journal, the famous kind of leftist pushing science is smarter than everyone kind of crap, and has been for 100 years. They all had to lay down their arms. They'd been mocking the Big Bang, saying, this is just a fairy tale. This is Christian wannabeism before 1927, a little after 1927, but the CMBR just obliterated them. So they laid down their arm and they're like, let's commandeer Big Bang and talk about it like it proved us right all along. People won't remember in a generation. Look, most people today don't know Big Bang is Christian theology being proven right.
A Jesuit, right? Came up, discovered it.
Yeah, I was just saying a Catholic priest. People are going to mistrust it rightly if it's a Jesuit.
Sorry.
But yes. And two, their second stratagem, I believe, the second part of secular science is let's couple Big Bang, which is cosmology, with Darwinian pseudoscience. Darwin pseudoscience, I strongly believe that. I don't believe macroevolution, but it's coupled in everyone's mind. So you start, I asked one of my friends today, Dr. Frank, really smart guy. I asked him, hey, what's your view on old Earth, young Earth? I'm doing this show tonight. And he goes, I don't know. And he started talking about evolution. When you see Richard Dawkins doing all these old debates, he does a debate against John Lennox at, I think, Harvard. And it's really interesting. John Lennox is a smart Protestant mathematician. Yes, there are smart Protestants, some of them. And He's talking. They're talking about the age of the earth. All of a sudden, Dawkins is talking about. They're talking about the age of life because he's a biologist or something. Then all of a sudden, he's dipping back and forth between old Earth models and evolutionary models. One's biology, right? And it's bad biology, and they know they can't get pressed on it. Darwin's book was called "The Origin of Species," meaning where did life come from, right? He never says what the origin of species is because it's a stinking joke, man. It's a joke. You can't. They've tried to model like primordial goo, or primordial sludge, they call it. They try to say, well, amino acids are kind of like explanatory, or blue-green algae, or they don't have a stinking clue. All right. So Darwinianism can't get off the ground because they are committed to atheism. That's the big game, materialism. And they can't get off the ground because they'd have to say, well, God created life. You need God to create life. You need God really for the primordial atom, the Big Bang. You can't say first there was nothing, then it exploded. So God still had to create the atom, but they all reluctantly, all these atheist scientists had to admit after 1965, yeah, you really can't talk about time before the Big Bang. Now, they don't say time was created then, which it probably was there or shortly before it, but they'll say we can't speak of normal space-time before the Big Bang. So these are all L's, man, for them, and they're all wins for us. And it's really, really important to take your wins when you get them.
I just offered Andrew if he wanted to maybe call and he could just read that thing. We'll see what he says. I think he's having some internet issue. So if he calls, just answer the phone there. Matthew Schmidt said, would you be willing to invite someone from the Colby Center to discuss or even formally debate the topic? Love the show, by the way. Have been watching since the TNT days.
Thanks a million. Yes, you're not Father Matthew Schmitz. That guy wasn't Matthew Schmitz. I'm thinking Mike Schmitz. Yeah, thank you.
Jacob Johannes Schmidt.
Yeah. I'm currently setting up a debate between Robert Sungenis and my brother, which is something I asked him a long time ago. Hey, would you be interested in talking to my brother who's a PhD in geology? And he said, yeah. And then I asked him after I did that show with Greg, my brother, 12 days ago, hey, would you be interested in a debate? And he said, yes. So yeah, absolutely. And he's with the Colby Center. So, Greg's going to throw a lot of really well-established geological basics at him and see, okay, well, what happens here? And it'll be a friendly debate, and we're all Catholics here, and we all believe, that Adam and Eve were real people who had a fall in the garden. All the things that the Pontifical Biblical Commission have said we have to believe from Genesis that are historical Adam and Eve, fall, willful fall, original sin enters the world, death enters the world. Is it animal death or human death? Okay, well, that's going to differ based on where you are, but we have to believe that concupiscence is the altered state of man, and it's a direct effect of the fall, the original sin, and the important other direct effect that necessitates is a redeemer would have to come after that point. A redeemer is Jesus. And Jesus would be the new Adam. Adam's a real guy. So all of us agree here. But I'm just saying, take your wins. The Big Bang was a huge win. And if you don't believe me, believe like Stalin's chief Politburo propagandist. Believe Red China. Believe they were putting scientists to death for Big Bang theology. Look at the embarrassment. Just Google it. Look at the embarrassment that Nature Science Journal here in America had to do when they had to reverse their view on the Big Bang. They hated it. They absolutely hated it.
And now they've commandeered it.
Right? And that was a very deliberate move because that stuff works. I'm looking for Stephen Hawking's quote because
another super chat, just a thank you. Thanks for covering the topic. Catholics need to know the truth. Do evolution next if you haven't.
Evolution's tough because they haven't produced anything, right? So I like going through Big Bang because there's a lot to grab by the horns there. And it's like, look, this was basically being they were trying to kill it in the cradle from between 1927 and 1965. They being the world atheists in science. And those nearly 4 decades, they couldn't. And here were the developments. And it's a great kind of narrative story. And it's basically a grad student of Einstein's, more or less, Father Lemaitre, that pointed out, here's your fudge factor. And Einstein ended up admitting he was wrong. I mean, let me reread real quick. I'm just reading from page 164 of this book, Faith, Science, and Reason. Einstein was very uncomfortable with the idea of a beginning precisely because it sounded too biblical. As he told Father Lemaitre, it suggests too much the theological idea of creation. He was not alone. Arthur Eddington, who had been one of the top 1919 expeditions that proved Einstein's theory, who had been on one of the 1919 expeditions that proved Einstein's theory, responded to Lemaitre's theory by declaring, the notion of a beginning is repugnant to me. I simply do not believe that the present order of things started off with a bang. An eminent scientist named Walter Nernst even wrote that the foundations of science, post-Enlightenment science, would be undermined by denying that the universe and time had always existed. So they had to have that steady state. No creation, because creations require a creator. In fact, the idea of an ever-expanding universe persisted for many years after Hubble's discovery that the universe is expanding. In 1959, 2/3 of American astronomers and physicists still believed that the universe had no beginning. It is generally admitted that the scientific community was slow in accepting the Big Bang Theory, in part because of a widespread prejudice in favor of a perpetual atheistic universe. This prejudice was one reason, although not the only one, that a new hypothesis emerged that explained the expansion of the universe without a beginning. This so-called steady state theory eventually fell by the wayside as the evidence against it and in favor of the Big Bang accumulated. It's a strange story how the Big Bang ended up being confirmed. And then it goes on to the story. It's a great story, but just think of that Robert Jastrow. Think of Stanley Yaki, who's a Benedictine monk who also studied all this stuff. And he just keeps saying, look, we're getting nothing but win. We're stacking up nothing but wins here. Is Andrew not back in?
No, I think he was having some issues, so we might have to bid adieu.
Bid adieu to
Adios, Andrew.
St. Augustine said that God, being outside time, created the universe together with time itself, so there is no before creation. And Hawking pointed at this, Stephen Hawking. He remarks that modern cosmology surprisingly resembles this structure of St. Augustine's because if time begins with the universe, according to Stephen Hawking, asking what happened before the Big Bang may be meaningless in the same way asking what's north of the North Pole is meaningless. Hawking was explicitly drawing a parallel between Augustine and Big Bang style cosmology. He's not endorsing it. He doesn't like it, Stephen Hawking. He wants to run it down in his wheelchair and to drive over it to death, but he couldn't. So you have I read you all these guys from the time that just hated it. They absolutely hated it because it was such a win for Christianity. So the age of the earth really doesn't matter. That's what I'm saying. And I do get the priests' qualm with, okay, well, what do we do with the timelines? Andrew and I were talking about that. No one knows. We're talking about the foundations of the earth. It's not going to be necessarily simple, but the point is, the big win is that the universe was clearly created, and creations require creators. So
I also want to shout out, let me if I can get this to Andrew, because he's not here right now. If you guys want to look at more of his stuff, he does have Bible study on YouTube under the channel Word Made Flesh. It's one word. He's a very intelligent guy, studied under Dr. Scott Hahn, graduated at Franciscan, is going to be doing some really great things for the church, I'm sure, with his
Word Made Flesh at youtube.com. Sorry.
Let me get that up on the screen. You can continue. I'll put that up on the screen for people so they can see that.
No, you're good. It's a reference to John 1. Okay. Well, so I guess that's a wrap. That's a lot of info. I wanted to, I think narrative is the way to go here. So people, I don't know, respond in the comments, because it'll be useful to me. Respond in the comments. Does that narrative reframe, absolutely historically accurate, no exaggerations, narrative reframe about Big Bang cosmology really being the good guy, the pro-Christian side of science in the 20th century, does that help explain why I'm so little concerned? He's back.
He's back. Here he is, the man. Here he is.
Am I back on? Am I back on?
Yeah. Sorry, no, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
All right, I'm trying to get your YouTube channel up on here too.
Yeah.
I'm just having a hard time finding it, but I'm looking for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Do we want to go through comments, or were you doing that when I was gone? I can't tell.
No, I was going through stuff. I'm down for yeah, we're getting you're sounding a little bit like Mr. Roboto, which I'm not. I'm kind of into that. That's kind of cool, but not saying that's all bad. But you're showing Word Made Flesh.
Yeah, so this is some of Andrew's content right here. So subscribe to Word Made Flesh. So it looks like he has a lot of Bible study stuff on here. Sorry, I wish Andrew was here to promote his own stuff, but I'll do the best I can. But a lot of stuff on Matthew right now that's showing up there. So check out his stuff on Word Made Flesh.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so Andrew, I don't know if you are interested in saying anything out, any parting shots and sounding like Mr. Roboto, or you just want to.
I don't even know. Can you guys hear me? Is it just going to be robotic noise? Like my screen is just black. It's like a distorted version of
you.
Yeah,
you're looking into the void. You're staring into the abyss now.
Yeah. Sorry, I think we've lost him again.
When the abyss stares into you, stare back. Is that Nietzsche? Okay. Well, yeah, we'll just call it there. But look, I mean, it's a complex question, and I just don't want people out there to feel like they have to run from science that's becoming more and more established. You know, like you see this happen with people that get really bad health diagnoses sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, I'm trying crystals, and I'm trying." Maybe they're not Christian, you know, and we're trying apricot seeds, and you're trying like they get. It's natural to get more and more desperate. We don't have to be that way with science. It's one thing to go get a second opinion, right? It's one thing to go get a second opinion. That's what you should do if you get a bad diagnosis, and you hope that you're most likely to sort of shake free of the bad diagnosis on your second opinion. But if you get a second opinion and they're like, "Yeah, we just tested it. You know, you have amoebic dysentery. You're going to have diarrhea forever until you die." Then you're like, "Oh gosh, heavens no." And then you get a third opinion and they're like, "Yep, it's amoebic dysentery." And you get that more and more and more, and it gets more and more pat. Then this is what I see happen to a lot of the sola scriptura evangelical crowd going to college in Texas. There's just a lot of kids like this that were afraid of science. And the more pat a scientific theory becomes, because they can never really prove anything, you know, so that science doesn't prove truth, the more they're like, well, 99.999 or whatever your margin of error is. I feel really beat back, and you're just, it's a retreat to a kind of fideism that is not Catholic. So I don't want people to feel like they have to run from truths, whether they're a priori or a posteriori truths. And that's what, you know, that's what people should take out of the 20th century. I haven't done the quantum Thomism show yet, but that stuff is awesome. That also involves Wolfgang Smith. Everyone should go watch the Wolfgang Smith documentary called The Principle by Robert Sungenis. I disagree with him on Young Earth, but he put together a banger, amazing documentary called The Principle, and it's just beautiful, and it's shocking. A kind of, you know, could there be a Copernican revolution on the Copernican revolution? It doesn't prove it, but it's a strong case. Can you out Copernicus with actual science from the CMBR, which is all Big Bang residue radiation? Fascinating stuff. And I just want people to know the 20th century was a major win for biblical Christianity, which even includes those Protestants who have always been so afraid of a priori truth, aka philosophy, and a posteriori lowercase t sort of truth, aka what we call the hard sciences today. The Protestants have always been afraid of that. I don't want Catholics to feel like they have to be afraid. If something becomes a 99.5, this is really well established, geology 101, cosmology 101, geophysics 101, sedimentology 101, paleontology 101, and it's really well established. I don't want people to have to paint themselves into a ever diminishing, smaller and smaller moral corner in the room where you just feel like the walls are coming in on you. And you just go, oh, Genesis 1 says this, Genesis 2 says that. Like that's not what we have to do. So, there was actually diversity of opinion among the fathers on important matters, like how to read Genesis 1. Now, they all kind of received the same science of the day, scientific presupposition about the age of the earth. But in Genesis 1, Augustine, who was very close to Ambrose, was not a literalist. He thought you kind of have to do away with literal Genesis 1. Ambrose did not. And you're allowed to have that view too. So that variance in your views. And we're allowed to look at science. It's not from the devil. It's not like dancing. Dancing is from the devil. I don't like it. But what's that movie, Footloose, where they think everything's
I've never
from the
seen
devil?
it. I know of it.
I haven't either.
I want to remind everybody that we have you're going to address the Pope's first encyclical that was released 2 days ago.
Oh gosh, I enjoyed this so much more. It's a 245 paragraph encyclical. I feel like people weighed in on it, but yeah, I'll be giving you my inestimable, what is it? I can't talk tonight.
It's going to be airing on Friday, so I'll pretend to be Tim Gordon.
Yeah,
my Pope versus AI show will be airing on Friday.
Well, I hate when you do one of these shows where you're pulling in literally geology, cosmology, philosophy, and then Andrew's handling the theology, and I'm like, okay. Then by the end, I just feel tongue-tied, like I was, taking the bar exam or something. Okay, well, God bless you all. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you want,
the best way to help the channel, by the way, is to subscribe. It's free, and it helps a ton in the algorithm to have more subscribers. So please, those of you, I'm seeing there's about 1,200 that are watching.
Please subscribe. Please to the channel.
Hit that
and hit
button.
the notification bell too.
It actually does help us quite a bit, more than you know. A second of your good grace will help the channel quite a bit.
Yeah, if you hit it, even if you're never going to watch again, it actually helps. And we've been having subscriber issues. So hit that. God bless you all. We're happy to read your comments, entertain, young earth, old earth. It's all good. We have to be open to where the truth points us. That's the most important thing. And that's what this channel does, is like, I don't have a team, I'm a trad insofar as you can't tell me that the Novus Ordo is half as good as the TLM. But I don't dress like them. I don't talk like them. I don't walk like them. I, have a lot of the same worldviews, but even the trads aren't really sufficiently patriarchal for me. But I guess I'm different on old earth, young earth than a lot of trads. So I was one of those kids that in high school I had friends in a lot of the different groups, and I guess that's some hallmark of the channel is not getting your gay little orientation packet. I was talking about this with my friend Jordan the other day. It's like, I'm going to be a Novus Ordo Christian. You start wearing your rainbow sandals to mass with your preppy khaki shorts or whatever, and your Oakleys here, and you have a received set of views. But if you become a trad, then they give you the trad orientation packet, and you get the puby beard, you know, the bad beard and the cheap suit that you're either too fat or too thin for, that doesn't fit from the Goodwill. And yet you make fun of people that don't wear suits all the time. And you get received views on Old Earth, Young Earth, and received views on the luminous mysteries. You make fun of the people who say the luminous mysteries, and received views on, you know, not just the Latin Mass, but, you know, even people that attend the Novus Ordo. You get received views on diet. You know, all of a sudden you have to do this, you have to do that. Yet I just don't play by those rules. I really want to go with, I really am strongly of the view that there, at any point in history, especially ours, but any point in history, there's never one subset of the people that's getting it all right. So we always have to discern, okay, where's the, yeah, I think trads are more right than the Novus Ordo set, but you get that dumb turn your brain off orientation pack, and they just tell you, here you go, welcome to the club. You have to be one of us now. We are all one of us now. I just don't play like that. We want to be right. And by the way, that's why people come to this channel. They're like, hey, you've called stuff more accurately than anybody else we watch. How are you getting stuff right? Not all the time, but a lot of the time, high portion of the time, it's by never turn your brain off and just go with the group think. Well, I'm a trad now. Now I can turn my brain off. That's not how it works. This is not how it works. I don't think that John Paul II, Benedict, even Francis, Pope Leo, Pius XII are wrong on, you know, I don't think they're modernists on this, even if they're weak on divorce and remarriage or something. So I'm just not with the trads on thinking that anything other than Young Earth is heterodox. That's just, I'm with the Catholic Church, you know, that's what you know, we're allowed to have these views, and I'm going to defend them robustly until I'm convinced otherwise. God bless you guys. Have a great night, and Dad's Vol.